the vendor track. So this is talk number 3. So we've got Rob Reynolds from Chocolatey talking around software deployment automation using PowerShell with Chocolatey. Again, same format. We've got 45 minutes. We'll try and keep 5 minutes towards the end for Q&A. Again, Rob will be at the kind of one-to-one room just at the end of the corridor there if you want to carry on with any of the conversations. But then, over to you, Rob. Cheers.
Thank you. Am I good on levels? Perfect. All right. This thing has not worked very well, so I probably will just bounce around a little bit. I hope that's okay. So, like you said, I'm Rob. I have lots of years of experience in infrastructure automation, and yeah, we'll start with that. So we're going to talk about a story of Windows automation. First of all, how many people were in my session last year here? 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, this isn't too bad. A couple of layers over there. All right. How many people in here have never heard of Chocolatey or just heard about it when they got here? Hecklers. Oh, right on. So we'll go over a little bit of what Chocolatey is, so you'll have that. All right, so to start off with, we always like to kind of talk about a story, possibly your story. We like to say it's the story of modern automation, right? Some people call this DevOps. We call it modern automation. And so you or your boss had said at some point, we see this Linux doing well, we're going to automate Windows, right? And so you probably use, or you may have used some traditional tools in the past to do some of that Windows automation, where maybe it was golden images, maybe it was manual configuration, maybe you went out to those machines and you were doing a lot of work, and that grew to lots and lots of machines, and it became a bit crazy, right? Or endpoint management tools, and SCCM, other things that kind of fit into that. Not that these things are necessarily bad, they just don't fit so well into some of these more modern automation scenarios. When we say modern automation, we should probably define that a little bit. So when we're talking about modern automation, we're talking about infrastructure as code, being able to test our infrastructure. Hopefully that thing didn't just go. And reporting and kind of being able to see something across the enterprise for that. And so you started doing your work, and you modernized your Windows automation. And so we're going to say DevOps. It's like rainbows and unicorns, okay? So stick with me for a second. Rainbows and unicorns. All right, so this is you. Right, you're out automating, making things better, using that configuration management tool. Maybe it's Puppet, Chef, PowerShell, DSC, whatever, Ansible. So your boss is really happy. Just your boss. Your coworkers, they're dancing, man. They're excited about this, right? And things are going really well, really well. And then suddenly, everything gets this real high, and then everything comes crashing down. Right, something wasn't quite right. Configuration management alone, especially in Windows, is missing something. When it comes to software management, we say that's probably about 50 to sometimes 90% of what you do. How many people in here say you provision Windows? Basically, you get that stock Windows box, and then you don't put any software on it, you don't do any configuration. Anybody? I had one person raise their hand last year, and I said, "Oh, you don't?" He said, "No, I delegate that." Smart man, smart man. And so when it comes to that Windows software ecosystem, there are lots of different installer types out there. And if people don't like any of the 20 published formats, they just create their own. I'm sure you've never had to deal with those. Those are fun. And then there's, of course, zips and other archives, possibly your own internal software. And when we look at how we would deploy like a zip or an Inno setup or an MSI or something, right? When we start looking at those installers, we have one way of deploying them. When we look at the zips and archives, we have another way. And where Chocolatey steps in is it's more of this universal packaging format. So we take all aspects of this Windows software, and we treat them all as first-class citizens. So your zips, your scripts, your binaries, and yes, those runtime installers as well. So I should ask, how many people in here use Chocolatey in production? Right on. Has anybody been using Chocolatey for more than 5 years? I got 2. 2. Okay. We'll start. Shirt size. Small. Oh, no. Shirt size.
Shirt size.
medium. I have a large and extra large. So as long as your shirt size fits into that, you're good. And so we recently did something called Chocolatey Fest, which was also known as WinOps San Francisco. And nobody actually really talked about the back of the shirt. And we really like that. So it says, "Come with me and you'll see a world of Windows automation." So there you go. And if you want large as well, just find me at the booth later. But hold on to this one. Yes, I didn't take out the recording this time. All right, so what you get with Chocolatey, you get to write that software deployment one time, right, with PowerShell. And you're able to deploy that anywhere you have Windows, and pretty much any version of Windows. So as long as you're not deploying Windows 2000 somewhere, God help you if you are, then you can still use Chocolatey, right? So you can still use 2003 for a little while with Chocolatey and be able to deploy to that all the way up to Windows Server 2019. So we supported that day one out of the box. And you're able to do that Docker containers as well. You can put Chocolatey in there. And of course, all of the different tools that are out there for helping with those deployments, you can use those. And Chocolatey has something coming, at least on the commercial side, called Central Management. We'll see that a little bit, right? And we're able to manage and track that software over time, whether or not it has installers. And that's really important for security-conscious organizations, right? Because if it's in programs and features, a lot of other things you're going to be able to see that. If it's not in programs and features, then it becomes a much trickier proposition. Chocolatey is going to be tracking that too. So you're able to actually see those, and then you're able to actually remediate when there are those issues. So breaking that down a little, again, because we're using PowerShell, we're not locked in. We're using technologies we should know, right? It comes to Windows automation. And we have one interface that manages all aspects. That's what makes Chocolatey unique as compared to everything else. Of course, tight integration with configuration managers and everything else. We still have some sort of integration. Now we do get to write our scripts. We get to write PowerShell scripts to do that, hopefully. If you don't have PowerShell in that, you could always use batch scripts or direct Chocolatey commands. And it is completely offline. It does not call home at all. It does not need any internet access whatsoever. There's no telemetry or any of that crazy stuff in there. We don't believe in that. Now, the one interesting thing I'll tell you is when you do install Chocolatey, it is hooked up to a community repository by default. That community repository is online. So that's the first thing you should turn off and then set up your own stuff. Right? It's also very flexible. If you have PowerShell modules or functions or things that you want to run inside of Chocolatey packages, you can create Chocolatey, what are called Chocolatey extension packages, and be able to deploy those modules as well. They bring functionality into Chocolatey as if it was built in. How many people knew that? Probably everybody in here. No, that's great. All right, and so it does mean we need to talk about it a little bit. So my boss, which is me, wants me to make sure that we do mention a little bit of Chocolatey for business and kind of talk about a little of the differences, because a lot of the really interesting stuff is kind of falling into that business side. And so when we look at Chocolatey open source, that's strictly about package management. And that's fantastic. It works great in organizational use. As you're wanting to do more with that, you kind of build your own world, right? And so when we say what does Chocolatey manage? Packages, right? And when we say package, that's Chocolatey packages. Those are new packages. So Chocolatey manages the packages. The packages manage the software. The software can go into programs and features. That software can go somewhere else on the box. It's the package that actually manages that side. So Chocolatey does not manage programs and features directly. Right? So when you start thinking about packages, those new packages, everything else is software, installers, binaries, whatever, right? And that makes it really easy to talk about the terminology when we take package away from things like MSI, right? Because traditionally we think of MSIs as packages, and in this context they're not. So Chocolatey for business, or C for B, a little bit more complete software management. So our approach is just to own more and more of that as we go. We're building up on top of open source with better system integration, endpoint management, and a lot more visual interfaces. We do that because we recognize, you may be very command line driven. Your coworkers, they might like GUIs, right? And so we want to give you guys the same tools to do your job at the end of the day. And lots and lots of features that are geared specifically for organizations are what you're going to see inside of those commercial sides. So Chocolatey, it's over 7 years old. We're going to be 8 in March. Wow. Does anybody know the day? Got a Chocolatey t-shirt. 21st of? Yes. Yeah, 21st of March. Wow. Happy birthday. Early or belated, whichever. If you've seen Chocolatey, it's got this nice familiar command, tool name command type of user experience, right? But there's also PowerShell tab completion if you're in PowerShell, which is handy if you can't remember how to type the command. Fortunately, most of the commands have short names, long names, and even longer names, because we can't remember stuff, especially me. So it says, does this work with this? Does it work with this? It works with all of it. Unfortunately, it doesn't catch for misspellings. But we also have a GUI, and this is great, say, people that really like GUIs, but also non-technical users. They get big clickable icons. It's really hard to mess that up. It really is. But I mean, anything's possible, right? One of the things that we have on the Chocolatey for Business side is what we call self-service management. So if we have users that are non-administrators, and we don't want to have a lot of back and forth with IT tickets and stuff trying to get things installed, we bring in self-service, and then they can install and upgrade some of this optional software on their own. And so that's really handy for a lot of organizations. Central management. This is out in what we call early beta. We're moving into what's called an early preview, which means it's semi-supported. And that's going to happen really soon. And we're going to continue to make this better. And so central management has really got the first aspect, which is reporting. And that is going to actually have a little bit more on I know it's a little tiny up there, but a little bit more into tabs and stuff that we're going to talk about. Here's a report. Can I print this report to PDF and share it with an organization, share it with my boss, so he has something he can read and really understand versus, giving him a command line output and saying, here. Yeah, they don't like that. The architecture for this is, of course, we have all of our machines inside. They have a Chocolatey agent, an actual Windows service that's running all the time, and that will report in to these, what we call master Chocolaters, right? So these Windows services. Funny enough, these ports are actually switched, but they are 24626 and 24020. They spell Choco. It's not an accident. But of course, on the back end, we have a SQL Server cluster, or whatever you decide to do there, and it's Entity Framework core, and so whatever works with that, you can use. We're going to support SQL Server, so you're probably going to end up using SQL Server, but you can use whatever there. And of course, that management UI we just saw a little bit of. And at first, it's really going to be about administrators. We'll be getting into that. As it continues to develop out, we're going to see more and more modules that will bring in maybe users if we offer a self-service module so they can go to a website. And of course, packagers are going to be coming in as package builder elements get brought into here as well. Some people are like, what is package builder? What are these other things? But we'll talk about that. Chocolatey does integrate with everything. So we do very tight provider-based integration for all those configuration management type things. And we do that because we kind of see that modern automation is where everybody's going, right? So we focus a lot of efforts there. What's also great is a lot of the organizations that are here, that are represented behind these, are the ones that are actually managing these providers too. PowerShell DSC we manage. Does anybody use the PowerShell DSC? Like the C Choco resource? Use that one? It's getting a release soon. Right, Paul? Oh, there's a new release. Hey, look at that. So Paul is now the product owner for that. So thank Paul. We just got a new release for C Choco, PowerShell DSC resource. So that's really good. It's been like a year and a half, and there was a couple of features that needed to get out. So pretty exciting. But script-based, that's back to that PowerShell. I want to say Octopus Deploy also has like a template you can use, and that would bring it kind of back up into a little bit more provider-based. But it's really about writing PowerShell scripts to work with, say, SCCM working with Chocolatey. And they're actually not competitive. They're very complementary to each other. SCCM does kind of everything. It's not like super hyper-focused into like that software management like Chocolatey is. And so Chocolatey gets a lot better on the reporting, and a lot better into some of the other areas, not just saying, hey, it failed. All right, so we have our community repository. This has been up a little over 7 years, and it's got quite a few packages. I don't know how out of date this is, but a little over 6,200 packages are up there now, and lots and lots of installs coming off of that. And every single version of every package that goes up does not go live immediately. It goes through what we call a moderation review. It gets checked for quality and consistency. It gets checked to be sure that it can install properly. You wouldn't believe. And then also gets checked against VirusTotal. So it gets pushed up, all the binaries get pushed up to VirusTotal to get checked against 60 to 70 antivirus scanners, right? And over this process, at the end of it, if everything is good, then it goes to typically a human moderator who gives it a thumbs up. That's when it goes live. That's when we can install it. That process can be done in about an hour. If we're trying to push through like Git had a CV and they're trying to get their new version out, that could be done in an hour, but typically it's like a couple of days, and sometimes maybe a week. Now, even with all of that, we want the organizational experience to be very reliable. That's not something that you can get from that community repository. And the reason is distribution rights, software copyright laws keep us from putting binaries inside of packages. So Microsoft would be really upset if like the Office 365 packages actually contained Office 365, right? So a lot of these packages, when they install, they're going to reach out and download this stuff, right? And so what we recommend instead is to internalize. You could do this manually. You pull down a package, you see where it's downloading things from, pre-download them, bake them into the package, or put them somewhere internal, point to that instead, rewrite that packaging to do that. We have something called Package Internalizer will do that all, and quite quickly. And that kind of plays into our organizational architecture. What you'll see is you got your internal network or internal cloud or whatever. And in here, you would have one or more repositories. We're going to recommend typically a few. And that can be one instance of like Artifactory, Nexus, or ProGet, or like 10 instances of Chocolatey server. And you would set that up, right? And so if you brought in the internalizer, you would maybe put it into the DMC, put a Jenkins agent on it, and have it look and automate that process of that internalization, where we go get things, pull them in, and pre-download everything, push it into like a test repository, notify you so you can actually look at it before you push it to your end user, your end customers. That way you get that chance, that buffer. But you'll see none of this stuff in here, none of the stuff in your architecture should reach out to that community repository, not even to get Chocolatey and install it, right? So we recommend Chocolatey being inside here as well. We actually have documentation that'll walk you through this entire process of getting this set up, walk you through that entire process of getting that set up as well. We'll take a quick touch on that if we have time. So I did mention those repositories. We're not sales folks for these guys, but the really good stuff comes out of Artifactory, Nexus, and ProGet. They have these on-prem repositories. You install it one time, you get as many repositories as it'll handle, right? And we're not just talking about NuGet and Chocolatey type repositories, but RPMs, Debian, those types of things can be put in there as well. We like to say Artifactory is kind of the Cadillac because it has like 40 different repositories. Your Puppet modules, your Chef cookbooks, all that stuff can go in there. If you can dream it's a repository, they probably have it. If you're like, well, I do have SCZM distribution points, and I do want to use that for Chocolatey, you could set up a file share on top of those distribution points. So Chocolatey recognizes basically two types of sources, file shares and this NuGet OData type repository. That's where you'll see all those others. All right. This is really tiny, sorry. So when it comes to Chocolatey, going back to Chocolatey, you can see more than just what's in programs and features. In fact, it maintains its own idea of what's installed. And so it can see that it has all this stuff installed. It can see these other things that it's not managing yet, as we like to say. And of course, that can get reported up into central management. And if you have Chocolatey for Business as well, you can get package audits. So you get to see not just what's installed and what version, but who installed it, when was it installed, and what's that history. Right? So you get a little bit more tracking in that. When it comes to, of course, the central management, it's been pulling that information as well. You get a nice view of where your system is at currently as well. And going back to what's not installed yet, you can go through a process on open source where you would say, okay, I want to bring this package in. And I say, don't run the scripts, just make it know about it, right? If you have Chocolatey for Business, you just run that one command. It'll go look in programs and features. It'll figure out everything that you're not currently managing with Chocolatey, and on the fly, will generate packaging from that and baseline your system. You get all the packaging back, and then you manage upgrades from there. So very, very handy. Another thing is if you have systems that are out there that you're already doing inventory reporting with, and you want to make them tremendously more accurate. You want them as accurate as Chocolatey. Of course, we have this all packages and programs and features. And so sysinternals, all those tools that don't actually have installers, we can show inside of programs and features sheerly by flipping on a switch in Chocolatey. And Chocolatey starts managing them all for us. I don't know what to say about that. Very detailed logging by default, which is great because we're deploying to Windows. Is there anybody here that's deployed out to like a 500 count, or let's say, okay, let's go back a little lower, 200 or higher and not had an error? Like it went out to all 200 and none of them failed? Ouch. You wouldn't know if he had a fail, is what he said. All right, how about, okay, so, I mean, that's kind of the reason for that, is very detailed reporting or logging by default. So when it does fail, we kind of know what's wrong and when we should move forward on to figure things out and not try to create that scenario again. And then, oh yeah, now I need to get those really detailed logs. It's capturing that right off the bat. Other is seeing what's outdated, right? And so outdated is great. You know, not only do we see, you know, what's out of date on a system, but what's the version that's available, right? What version of SSH server here? That very first one, it says I have version, what, 5.6, 60, and 7.34 is available. If I see something like that, that's kind of a security finding. I would probably be bringing that one down immediately. So that's a nice awareness for like emergency maintenance types of scenarios. Of course, I can capture that, bringing it all up across the entire organization inside of central management, and I can drill in and see, you know, what's out of date across all these systems. Like, where is this actually installed? And I can go get them all fixed. All right, so how many people have created Chocolatey packages? Right on. Do you use Choco New? Do you copy, paste, and change? Yeah. Well, we recommend Choco New just because what it has is as a template, it has loads of information. It kind of helps you through that process. We kind of call it interweave documentation or just-in-time types of documentation that really kind of like sets the scene. There's like a little underscore to-do file that gets generated as well. We'll actually see that. And it really helps you get through that process. And so one of the things that we see, creating packages, it takes probably somewhere between 10 minutes to an hour, depends on if you know everything you need to know. Anybody able to do it in 2 minutes or less? Nobody? Okay. So one of the nice things that we've seen is we think we can do a little bit better on that. We want to give you the ability to just right-click on your MSI, executable installer, whatever, and then get a context menu that says, create this Chocolatey package, and in 5 seconds, I get a fully unattended software deployment or Chocolatey package. And this is going to work for about 70% of the software installers out there because every installer is a special snowflake, as we all know, especially in Windows. And so when it doesn't work, of course, it's going to get everything arranged for us still. And it's going to give us a little to-do list and says, here's the additional steps you need to do. Step this, do this, and oh yeah, now you're good, you're automated. Sometimes you run across things that don't work very well. They don't want to be automated. They have pop-ups you can't seem to automate away. And so one of the things that we recommend is MSI repackaging. So you could use auto hotkey, and you're going to see that on the community repository because that's typically what they have to do. What we recommend is looking at like an MSI repackaging because you can't run the auto hotkey stuff through a Windows service. It doesn't work because that's what's called session zero isolation. And a lot of the things that pick up the windows and close them need to have an interactive use, right? You don't get interactive use inside of a Windows service. So we recommend MSI repackaging. And is anybody not familiar with MSI repackaging? All right, I'll explain it real quick. So what it is you take the crappy installer, technical term crappy, and you run the install at the same time you're recording what it's doing. And at the very end of that, you get an MSI you deploy instead, which is totally automatable, right? We can also do it for you as part of that business side. So that's just another thing out there. And this is always a fun one to explain to people. So again, Chocolatey manages packages. So let's say I take the Adobe Reader package and I install it. And let's say that's an installer package, so it's going to put Adobe Reader, the software, into programs and features. And so I upgrade that package. That should upgrade that software. I uninstall that package. Hopefully that uninstalls that software, right? Now what happens if somebody goes directly to programs and features and they uninstall software? Well, it depends. If I'm on open source Chocolatey, Chocolatey is very strictly about package management, and so the package is still there. Right? So it's a bit of a discrepancy, right? So we correct that inside of all the commercial editions where we allow Chocolatey to step back and go, hey, look, that software got removed. I should go ahead and remove this package, and so it does. And so we've had the requests from some of our customers, well, could it do the opposite? Could it put the software back? And so we see that as like a configuration management thing, so it's not something that we would turn on by default. But yeah, we should probably put a feature switch in for that. So that's something that we're looking to add into that as well. Because if you want Chocolatey to be that source of truth, and to actually manage what's there, it kind of makes sense that it should be able to put it back if it gets removed. Of course, that's always fun when somebody uninstalls it and it comes back in 2 minutes, and they uninstall it and it comes back in 2 minutes. What's going on here? We always say in configuration management, make sure you put like a little note in here. If you change this file, it is going to get changed back in 30 minutes, or whatever that schedule is. And you wouldn't necessarily see this in there. Maybe you'd get a little note somewhere, or a little pop-up window. Stop uninstalling this. All right. So lots of other features. Since we only have a certain amount of time, we can't really get into all of them. So hopefully we'll see a couple of them as we go. And lots of other features inside of course, the business edition as well. On a roadmap, of course, you saw a little bit of that central management, kind of what it looks like. But if you can imagine, kind of taking that out a little bit and looking at like deployments is the next thing, because we want the ability, of course, for somebody to have, I have Chocolatey. I do want to be able to do deployments. I do want to be able to do sorts of like phased type of deployments where I deploy out to a small set of systems, and if that's good, if everything's stable, then I'll go up to the next set of systems and kind of watch that. And if that's good, then maybe I'll go out to my entire deployment chain, right? And so that's something we brought in. Anybody familiar with NuGet knows they've brought in authentic code signing for the entire package, right? We're kind of letting that stabilize, and we're going to add that into Chocolatey as well. So you can authenticate the binaries in there. You can authenticate, of course, the PowerShell scripts. You could actually authenticate the new package, but Chocolatey's not going to know what to do with it. It's going to ignore it. And we bring in the authentic code signing just so that you can get more verification, more lockdown to that. GPG signing is more something that we've been wanting to do for a very long time that brings traceability to that community repository. So when you go and you're like, oh, this package is the Puppet agent, and it says it comes from Puppet, but Puppet doesn't have this little verified like they do on Twitter. How do I know that's them, right? So that's kind of what that GPG signing is about. WSA, AppX, how many people have heard of MSIX? Oh, one? Perfect. You're going to hear about it in the next year and a half. But WSA, Windows Store apps, being able to manage those with Chocolatey, you can do all of this right now. You get to write the PowerShell for it. We want to write more of that so you don't have to maintain all of that. And that's kind of what that is bringing that in. Package enhancements. We've done a lot of package enhancements, actually. We just need to start taking those features that are dark and making them undark so you can see some of that. And then, what's interesting here? Lots more GUIs. We think GUIs are kind of interesting. Take a lot of work, though. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that we did Chocolatey Fest last year. And that was, of course, in the US. And it's, of course, WinOps. Over there. We're going to do it again. This time it'll be a 2-day event, and it's going to be in somewhere, if you've been there, in the US as well. But we'll have it up on Chocolatey Fest, so head out there. There might be, I think we'll have a sign up if we don't have it already. You can sign up if you're kind of interested in a trip to the US to see what that's like. Maybe you don't want to go. Maybe the whole politics, I'm not getting into that, is bad. We've talked about maybe like some sort of like Chocolatey boot camp sometime next year. Just like a 1-day thing, straight on Chocolatey. And because Chocolatey Fest is just like what this is, right? It's all these different types of presentations. It's just people see the name Chocolatey Fest, they think it's only about Chocolatey. So that's fine with us. All right. So what can we demo first? So let's say I have some computers here. This is actually an old build. There's been a newer version of this that actually tells me not just the number of computers I have under, but what my license says that I can have. I can see, of course, the machines that are under this last check-in date actually does have a time with it. Yeah, because we want to know, if it just checked in 30 minutes ago, we want to see that. Of course, all the machines, I could drill into a machine and see what kind of software it has. It's not going to be much, I don't think. Okay, I lied. It's going to be a lot. Another thing that it does by default is it will bubble the outdated stuff to the top. I don't know that maybe this has any outdated stuff on it. But then we could say, okay, I want to see what this is on across the organization. And I would get that. Of course, I only have 2 machines here. So this demo, it doesn't really lend well to itself on that side. But what we will start seeing is, of course, like a reports tab, a deployments tab sometime next year, and then quite a bit more. We're getting our versioning a little bit shorter, so you can actually tell us what version you're on. It's a little long, but we fixed that too. So you can tell I've got a little bit older build there. Let's just jump right in. So let's say I want to create a Chocolatey package, Choco new. Is this coming across well? Can everybody see that in the back? Great. I can make it bigger. Choco new, let's just call it Google Chrome, because that's the fun one. And what that's going to do is that's going to create all these files, right? So if you've been doing it where you're doing the copy paste and then changing things, just imagine how much time this might save. But at the very least, it's going to give you quite a few files. And I'm going to move this over a little bit so we can see it better. Quite a few files here, and then, of course, that new spec and everything as well. And so if I just pop this up, put this in Notepad, and is this big enough for everybody in the back? Perfect. All right, so this kind of gives you that. I'm on the README. That's not the one I wanted. The to-do gives us kind of this thought process like, oh, you look at the community repository, don't do what they do. They do these because they have to. So when you want the most deterministic use of Chocolatey, the best use, you want those binaries embedded in the package, right? That's going to make Chocolatey work the best. And so kind of follow that process, and it gives you that high level there. And then as we roll down, that works for me, it tells us, there's more than just installers. When everybody starts out, they're probably 95 to 100% installers that they're working with Chocolatey. But you can kind of step that out and go to the portables. You can actually deploy some configurations, some registry settings, all that fun stuff you can do with Chocolatey. Now, I'm not saying take that away from other things that manage configuration drift for you. Keep using those things if you have them. But maybe use Chocolatey a little bit more in those areas where you don't have those nice things. How to kind of fill out those contents at a high level. And then, of course, we have a test environment, which allows you to do that, testing your infrastructure, where you could rapidly install and uninstall Chocolatey on a Vagrant, Hyper-V, VirtualBox, or VMware is what that all supports on that. We also have a workshop. This is not the same workshop that was yesterday. This is a packaging workshop. We did it last year, I think, last year here. And it just goes through everything. And you can do it online. It's got step-by-step instructions. Hopefully, what we're doing right now, this Google one, is exercise 2. It's the most fun one. It's the one that makes you think the most. The rest of it gets a little bit easier from there. And so, of course, here's our new spec. And you can see lots of interweave documentation. It just kind of goes through everything. Kind of helps you figure out, what you need to fill out in here. Of course, I'm using Google Chrome. I'm maybe going to call it version 1.0.0. And do I have dependencies? No. But dependencies are actually really interesting. Also, a really good strong point when it comes to package management over other ways of managing software. So if you can imagine, for a second, we know it doesn't. Google Chrome depends on Java, and Java depends on 16 other things. Right? There's just this long chain. And if you had to map that out in any system to figure out how to install that, you would be doing that, kind of in every single system where you were going to deploy that. And you'd have to get a very specific install order and all of that. When it comes to Chocolatey, you literally say, okay, I depend on Java, and that Java package, I would then say what it depends on, and then Chocolatey and NuGet kind of work together to actually bring the things to the system in the right order. And it's putting that source of truth at the package point, at the place where it needs to be, or the last responsible moment, if we want to think of it like that. And so, not only could I say that, but I could say Java, we're actually restricted to at least version 6, 7 and 8, any version of 8, which is still being maintained, whatever. but not version 9 or above. I've kind of already described that, right? Could you imagine describing that in any other system? That's where package management starts to lean. It's like, oh yeah. So while they're out figuring out all that craziness, I'm having coffee, kind of moving on with my day. All right, so a lot of the stuff in Chocolatey is about making things quite a bit simpler. Now, we didn't actually add that dependency, so we left that whole section out. We could just get rid of that. So there's a README. The README's there because our documentation is getting more searchable. It's not quite there yet, so it's kind of helping you along. There's a before modify, an install, and an uninstall script. The before modify, 98% of the time, you don't need this file. It's if Chocolatey has locking going on, you need to be able to get into that. So we can get rid of that one. The uninstall, as you can see, a lot of this leans, again, because we know you're building installer packages most of the time, a lot of this is leaning to show you how to work with those installer packages and the template that it actually brings out. And so here, it's just showing you, hey, if you got an MSI, which we do, we would change this to say MSI, and all we'd have to do is make sure this is very close to what shows Google, if I could type it, Google Chrome. It might have a version or something after it, so I'm going to leave that asterisk. And because if it's an MSI, as I read down a little further, I don't need to change anything here, and the rest of this is figuring out if it's installed and uninstalling it for us. So I can just go ahead and finish that file up and close it. Again, we have something called auto uninstaller, so 9 times out of 10, Chocolatey is able to actually figure out how to uninstall the software when we uninstall the package without having an uninstall script. And so that's particularly handy in the case of Google, which auto upgrades, we do want that uninstall, just in case, right? So we don't want it to not get the right product ID when it tries to do that. License, not a file we need. Verification is not a file we need for internal use. Those are only community repository sites. So here, it's got lots of instructions, and it's saying, okay, am I getting this from the tools directory? Yes, I'm going to be getting from a file location. And so I would bring this like this, and I just need that file that I'm going to be putting in there. And then I need to know if it is an MSI. And there's some other options in here as well. And since I'm doing a straight file from here, I'm going to be using this one, and I'm going to be getting rid of these URLs. All right, now go ahead and kill out the rest of this and all this documentation stuff here. And hopefully that's going to clean it up nicely. Hopefully. So let's see how much further we can get this cleaned up. So we don't need the checksums. We do need the silent arguments for an MSI. We don't need any of this other stuff. And because we are using an embedded binary, or we will be in a second, that's telling us we should be using this aptly named install Chocolatey install package, as opposed to install Chocolatey package, right? Very well named. Naming is hard, folks. And then when you do name it, you're stuck with it for like lots and lots of years. It's kind of where we're at. And so we can go ahead and remove that. And go ahead and remove the rest of it. So there's a lot of different like use cases, and we try to capture a few of them. And you can see there's a lot here that you can just take out. All right, so we're now down to that. We still need to find out what the name of that installer is going to be. I'm actually going to go grab it, hopefully from somewhere close by. Let's grab that 64-bit one. And we'll drop that into Google Chrome here, Tools. Drop this here. We said we didn't need the before modify, so we can get rid of that. We didn't need these other 2 files. They go as well. And I do need the name of this file. Copy. Let it know the name. Tell it it's an MSI. And then make sure that we don't already have this package installed. CD, Google Chrome. And then we'll do a CPack or ChocoPack. Probably should do ChocoPack instead, but let's create that version 1. Let's see what we do have installed. Choco list, local only, include programs. And it looks like we have Google Chrome version 60, so maybe we should actually go see what version we have here and rebuild that package real quick. So we'll jump it in here. Let's see if this will tell us. Sometimes you can get the properties. The properties will give you the details of that. Looks like an older version. Maybe that won't work. We'll see. 54. Let's just say 62 and see what happens. Should be good, right? That's the hope. Chrome 67. It's somewhere above that number. We're going to rebuild that package. We're going to try to install it. Choco pack. And now we have this, as we look at the folder here, we got of course, an older one, but we have a newer one. And so because that's named the same as the package we already have installed, so we can just do a Choco upgrade, grade of Google Chrome, and -y. In scripting, we always want to use -y, just to make sure that it doesn't stop on anything, or if it does stop for a second, it only waits 20, and then it moves on. And then we're going to shorten down source. If we're scripting this out, we're going to type in -- source, thank you, and then we're going to see if this actually works. It may not, only because we think that version is older, and it's probably telling us that in this big error that we got. So fantastic. Chocolatey packaging, everybody. No, I'm just kidding. It does work. It does work when the thing does. But we actually do get to see what happens. So we have an exit code here, and this exit code tells us we had a generic MSI error. So Chocolatey is being very helpful, and it's telling us what our next steps are. And so sometimes red's hard to read, and so I'm going to kind of do this with it. Maybe not. I'm going to try to do something like that. Try to tell us what we need to do, right? So what it's saying is, hey, go to the logs, go find that log folder on Chocolatey at this location. So we're going to jump in there, program data, Chocolatey, and then we're going to jump into that. Where was it at? Chocolatey. Cache. There we go. And then we should look for Google Chrome down here. And hopefully we find the 67 one we tried to install. Edit with Notepad, Control Find, return value 3. In Chocolatey for Business, we're going to start pulling this out. But it says right there, a newer version's already installed. We can't do that, so it's not going to let us. But that's kind of how we'd walk through that process of creating packages. And next time, maybe I'll have a newer version that won't cause it to fail like that. So we could uninstall it, but let's just keep the version we have over there. And let's take a look at how we could actually speed that process up a little bit. And so I have some installers here, and one of them is 1Password. 1Password's an executable installer. Of course, I could right-click on it, and I could come down to Create Chocolatey Package without the GUI. And again, now I have a package that I can then deploy much quicker, right? And of course, if I want to push that package somewhere, normally I would do a Choco push from the command line. Something that I could do here is I could do that, upload it to a repository, and it's able to do that for me with that nice GUI. So some of this right-click context menu is some of these nice things that I'm starting to get when I start looking at Chocolatey for Business, right? So created that package, and we're just going to drop it here in this top level, CD up, and then we would do that install, Choco install, 1Password, -y, -s, again, the dot. This time it'll work. Hopefully first time go. So 1Password just did get installed. Now, as I take a look at that package itself, we're going to see what it did when it created that install script. It let auto uninstaller manage the uninstall, and of course we get all this good stuff here. It auto formatted all that for us. So there's a ton more I could have shown, but only 45 minutes. So we're going to jump back over here. Not to this one, to this one. So this is you? This is you on Chocolatey? Any questions? All right, we're actually going to take questions, I'm going to guess, down the hall, since it's about time. So if you want to take questions, I'll be moving backspace, what is it? Yeah, backspace. We'll catch them there. Oh, guess we do have time for a couple questions. Anybody? Was that good, huh?
Is reboot resilience supported?
Not yet.
Not yet.
It's coming. It's on the backlog somewhere.
Anyone else?
Boxstarter does reboot resilience. Yeah, I figured that's where you got that terminology from.
So you're including the binaries in the NuGet file, right? When you internalize a package like you just showed us.
Mhm.
Is there a limit how much data you can put in that package?
There is. I mean, there's a limit to how much you put in there, but the problem is if you try to push it up to something like Artifactory or one of those, they have a limit. And then the other side is, let's say it's like SQL Server you want to package up. We've seen people do it. They package up SQL Server. It's like a 5 or 6 or 7 gigabyte package, and they push it up. Somehow they get it up to Nexus, and then they try to install it, and it works great. It'll install once they can get it there. But then they have like this 6 gigabyte new package sitting on the system as well. And so what we typically recommend is when you have things that are just that large, so one of the things like Nexus, Artifactory, and ProGet support is the ability to have a binary repository. Put them in that, download those at runtime, and then you can clean those out right after you get that installed. So that's typically the way around it. It tends to work. Hopefully you don't run into a lot of things that are too big. We say right around 1 to 2 gigabytes, that's where you should look to start splitting binaries out. And that's not the size of the binary, that's the size of the compiled package. So if it's a little bigger than 1 gig, put it in there and see what it compresses down to.
Excellent. Okay, we're out of time.
Right, that's it.
Thanks everyone. Cheers.